World Happiness Week, celebrating World Happiness Day. March 20th is very important. Is like you are the Pope of world happiness.
Now,
So we want.
let me just say how happy I am to be with you, because this is an annual tradition, and your leadership and spreading these ideas and sharing these ideas and advancing them is so important. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah, and today I'm super excited because we are talking. I'm based today at the University for Peace, the United Nations University for Peace in Costa Rica. And this is the 5th year that we are running the Gross Global Happiness program. And we've trained more than 1,000 people already focusing on peace and happiness.
What a wonderful idea, peace, by the way.
Exactly.
You would think someone would like it. If we could get our world leaders into your class, that would be a good thing.
we need that. We need that, Jeffrey, because we all here are charged. I mean, when you see all these activists, people coming from all over the world, from refugee camps, from schools, from governments, from corporations, everybody is here super, super wired to make a profound change. But then we have conditions. So why don't we talk about that? I mean, what is the state of world happiness, and relating peace and happiness? What can we learn from the World Happiness Report this year?
Well, first, we are in the 10th year of the World Happiness Report. So we are, my colleagues and I, Professor Lord Richard Layard, and Professor John Helliwell and Jan Emmanuel Deneuve, all your close friends, Lara Aknin, we're really looking at this year as both taking stock of the past 10 years and thinking about the next 10 years in terms of this agenda. And what we conclude is there has been really an incredible awakening to the need to put well-being at the center of public policy, and an awakening of how this can be done, in part by directly measuring well-being. And of course, in the annual World Happiness Report, we look at so-called subjective well-being by asking people about their lives and what we can learn from that. It was 10 years ago that we launched the World Happiness Report, and that the world's governments said happiness needs to be at the center of development. So the good news is that this concept, this basic agenda, really has spread. And just like you're finding at the University of Peace, we find also all over the world the resonance of the idea that we need to move beyond the economic metrics alone, certainly, and we need to move to well-being. And now, the downside, we're not happier now than 10 years ago in much of the world. The most devastating conditions are in the war zones and in the places where there is a complete breakdown of civil life. And this is understandable because we depend on civil life, on civil society, on civil decency for any kind of safety, security, and quality of life. So this has been a very difficult period. Of course, we had a pandemic that is not quite over, though we think it's nearing the tail end of its severity, but nearly 20 million people died during this pandemic, excess deaths. And we have the war in Ukraine, and we have the geopolitical tensions. All of that is the backdrop that, on the one hand, the hunger for happiness is greater than ever. The recognition that happiness is not just a nice idea, it's something that can be inculcated in schools, in workplaces, in personal lives, in citizenship, that this is practical. improving the quality of life, and that it is something that resonates all over the world. So it's not an agenda of the West or the non-West or the developed countries or the developing countries. That's the positive side of all of this. And I, of course, even with all of our trials and tribulations, know one overwhelming fact: we can be doing much better now. We don't have to wait 10 or 20 years for more happiness. We don't have to wait 10 or 20 years on the battlefield for peace. We could achieve our objectives now. And that, I think, also calls on us for a kind of activism that we want to move forward now. We don't want to get trapped in violence, in poverty, in environmental distress, in all of the really significant challenges that can drag us down. We want to build on the happiness agenda. So that's really the message that I would have 10 years into this adventure.
Yeah, it's amazing. Actually, Jeffrey, I studied peace and conflict resolution back in 1995 at Richardson Institute in the United Kingdom. And Johan Galtung was already talking about positive peace, which is not just the absence of violence, but actually building the conditions. I think that thanks to your work and the World Happiness Report, academics and this community, we are really moving the agenda into another space, which is fundamental peace. And this is something that we don't teach at the university level. Actually, when you study international law or peace studies, which is the inner peace. And I think that we all can conclude that happiness, well-being, what is giving us are the tools to get into a state of inner peace that is going to be reflecting into the world. Because what we see today is so much intolerance, so much polarization, so much stubbornness that is not coming from having a fundamental peace mindset and mentality. So how can we keep advancing the agenda at the United Nations level, where when we talk of peace, we understand that it's about inner peace as much as the process and as much as the regulations that we put in place?
I think it's brilliant what you're saying, and really very fundamental and very important. First, you are rightly and powerfully linking two agendas: the well-being and happiness agenda on the one side and the conflict resolution agenda on the other side, because these are basically the same. And the point you're making is it's about mindset. It's about values. It's about personal virtues. It's about even how world leaders get along or don't get along. One of the things that's really driving me crazy, I have to say, I can't think of any other phrase, Biden and Putin need to talk to each other. We can't end the war with sound bites or with accusations or with Biden flying to Warsaw to give a speech about how terrible Putin is. How about sitting down together? They may not like each other. They may not reach an outcome at the beginning. But one of the takeaways that I have from conflict resolution, and correct me if I'm wrong, dialogue is vital. You cannot just make a list of demands. You have to see the world through the eyes of the other side. And the worst thing that we do is to say, we can't talk with him. He's just evil and there's nobody to talk to and we just have to win. And that kind of view takes away all of the moral, the ethical, and the practical means actually to change the mind, for the inner peace, for finding, that's what's bothering you. Well, we can work on that together. We can find solutions to these problems. You can't do that without dialogue. But I think it's also true that so much of well-being is also about social dialogue. It's about being treated with respect. It's about being a worker in in an enterprise where you're treated not as a cog, but as a human being. Treating young people in schools as having responsibility, having dignity and value will go a very long way in building character as well. So one of the things that for the last 10 years that has really engaged me is the fact that the first writer about happiness in the Western philosophical tradition, or the first three that made great headway, were Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. I'm an Aristotelian at heart. I love Aristotle, and I love the ethics that he wrote and the companion volume, The Politics. And the idea of those two books is that if we want to have a decent life, we need to develop our characters, our virtue, and that it is this inner vision that is going to lead to the kind of external actions of self-control, decency, honesty, peace, and so forth that are so critical. And I was in India actually just a couple of weeks ago, reading the Bhagavad Gita and seeing the virtue ethics of Hinduism, and going to Sarnath, where the Buddha first taught his disciples, first gave them the lectures about the eightfold path to peace and the fourfold truths. And it's also about inner peace and virtue. It's developing character for this. So I think if we can make headway on linking happiness and well-being with the virtues of being better people, better citizens, better leaders, with the conflict resolution ideas that go along with that, we could really make a lot of headway. And so it is the combination agenda that I think is actually so thrilling, exactly what you are espousing.
Yeah, thanks so much for that reflection. Actually, building on Socrates, what do you think about this line? Socrates said, the secret of change is to focus all your energies, not on fighting the old, but on building the new.
Socrates, of course, was always building the new because he was always saying, what do you think of that? And no matter what his counterpart answered, he'd come up with another question and another question. But what Socrates, of course, most fundamentally said is only the examined life is worth living, and only by thinking through internally and externally and thinking about building the future are we going to make it. So he was pretty wise. He definitely was the inspiration for Plato, who I have to thank for inventing academia. It was Plato's Academy that got us all started, and his student Aristotle gave us this wonderful insight into the links of character, ethics, and civility.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey, as always. I think that thanks to all this research that we have, I think that we are ready to build the new. And I feel that building the new from the inner being is going to be key. Of course, that we need Biden and Putin talking to each other, but we need the civil society taking responsibility as well. And I think that's what happiness and well-being can be so strategic for all of us, because it's up to us to choose to use them and to use those tools. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. You're leading. We're with you. This is phenomenal, and you've got it exactly right, and you're pointing us towards the right kind of future. So I'm most grateful. So happy to be with you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.